Jack Hoffman's and the Asset Institute's paper is an important contribution to a discussion that we're not having, and that we need to have about the role of government in Vermont, particularly in tough times. My brief remarks speak to what must happen in order to have a fair and full conversation about what should or should not happen in hard times. All administrations and legislatures up to this time took their obligation to people in need more seriously than those of today. All before have increased funding during recessionary times when the needs of the people were the greatest. The current budget policy is a gross break from that history and approach to difficult times. And this policy shift has not been challenged or even closely examined. It is an unconsidered fundamental change in policy as it relates to the needs, particularly of our elders and children in Vermont. Dick Snelling said it best when he counseled Vermont to use the good times to set money aside for the hard times and do our budgeting on a full cycle economic basis. In this regard, we've lost our way. It is very possible that in 2011 and 12, that human services programs, services, and infrastructure will be reduced by a couple $100 million, both general and federal funds, over the next couple of years. And these aren't cuts to the agency human services. These are cuts to people that past policy of the state of Vermont says must be served. This is a moral obligation on the part of our political leaders. Worse, both this fundamental shift in policy and its expression in the budgets now under consideration have not been a function of studied and thoughtful review. They are simply a victim of a rush to the bottom in the blind frenzy of cutting budgets. There are several fundamental criteria that makes a good budget: thorough review, clarity, integration, and transparency. The challenges approach to this budget meet none of these criteria. The shallow challenges part of this budget cutting process is extremely onerous in that it is used primarily as an excuse to blindly cut $38 million from the 2011 budget. Having a legislature simply hand over the responsibility to make these deep cuts, plus generally equivalent federal fund cuts in human services, is unprecedented and unwise, and even seems calculated to avoid responsibility. Knowing that changes outlined in the challenges report cannot nearly be accomplished fully or even fully in the upcoming fiscal year, the legislature is giving carte blanche to the administration to make these cuts without reasonable public review. The challenges process does not meet any of the standards of clarity, thorough review, integration, and transparency. But whenever one criticizes one process or another, you should have a better alternative. There is a better way which still can be done. This approach is based on my belief that there's about a $40 to $45 million gap in the current budget plan that will not be realized as a result of both the challenge shortfalls and the continuing state hospital mess. First, they need to go back to the budget table and detail the line item cuts that will equal $38 million in general fund and put them in priority order and integrate them along with the other cuts already made in the budget. Secondly, keep track of the savings that the challenges report. There will be some savings, but use those savings to offset some of those particularly onerous cuts in the overall budget. This approach is at least an approach where the legislature exercises its lawful authority to adopt a complete budget, and at the same time leaves room to improve the budget as the efficiencies of challenges are realized. Savings that do emanate from challenges could then be used to begin to offset reductions in the budget in priority order. This approach recognizes the reality that challenges cannot save $38 million in the time period prescribed, but does also put whatever savings accrued to good purpose, and in the process keeps the legislative authority to write and adopt a budget for the state of Vermont intact. But most importantly, This approach would put the entire budget on the table, where our view of government and its role in hard times and all the budget cuts are put into one place to be evaluated, argued about, and considered in the Vermont way to make the best decisions we can in a difficult time. Vermont deserves no less. Finally, so much of this pain could have been avoided if both legislatures and administrations from the mid to late 90s had stayed the course on Dick Snelling's full economic cycle view of budgeting for the state, which in its simplest forms was using the good times to put away money for the bad times. But Vermont got into the habit of spending almost every excess dollar that came through the door through its waterfall spending period, so that when bad times inevitably came, the stores in our cupboard were woefully inadequate. And it is the people of Vermont that are now paying the price for this short-sightedness. As Jack's paper shows, the real test is still ahead when the federal fund largesse begins to inevitably disappear. Thank you.